long before we became obsessed with self-help books and magazine articles, long before the magazine articles got turned into social media, long before we could imagine what it was possible for us to be. I mean, with good plastic surgeons and the right diet, who knows how good looking we could be? Of course, for those of us who lived in Dallas, and when we looked at Jerry Jones, we also knew how bad that could make us look. That's a different story. There have been more self-help books written since 1960 than one could even imagine. No telling how many libraries one could fill up with those books, telling us what we need to do. But long before people begin writing those self-help books and people begin, saying this is a better way of living and this is how you can fix it and so forth. At the very beginnings of our heritage in this country, we were blessed or cursed, depending upon how one looks at it, by the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson in that essay, Self-Reliance, which was, by the way, incredibly bad theology for a New England theocrat who was supposedly enlightened. But then again, that's the strange thing that happened across New England with our congregational forebears. As they became more enlightened, some of the theology got stretched in different ways. We came to hear that narrative over and over again. What we could do, what was possible, how we could be self-reliant. My wife and I sometimes have kind of joked about her time living in New Hampshire. And she would sometimes make jokes on certain TV programs. She said, well, if they were in New Hampshire, they would have already had that torn apart and tried to put it together 3 different ways. We tell ourselves those stories, and oftentimes we fail to be cognizant that we have been made from beginning to be people of community and relationship. Nevertheless, if something happens and I work up the courage, I continue to tell myself, maybe I can fix this. And then $200 later, I inevitably have to call somebody who really does know how to fix this. I want to believe that I have the capacity to do whatever is needed. It's just within us and the narrative. Paul, in this letter to Ephesians, and I'm going to say Paul because you don't really care about debates that take place in theological circles, but for the longest time, nobody actually believed Paul wrote this letter. And the British were the only people, the scholars, stubborn enough not to let go. And finally now, people have kind of come around begrudgingly and said, well, maybe Paul really wrote this letter. It doesn't matter. All right, it's canonized and it's there, and it was written supposedly to the church in Ephesus. And at the very beginning, what Paul the Apostle or Paul's disciple, whomever, wrote this thing, tried to let us know that it's not what we do for ourselves that makes that much difference, but rather it is always about that which God has done. And all the verbs, if you notice, are about what God has done. For instance, listen to some of those verbs, if you will. God has chosen us, forgiven us, redeemed us, adopted us, marked us. There's nothing in here about what we have achieved by hard work and earnest endeavor and sly maneuvering and burning the midnight oil. It is a testimony to to this God who is behind all things and within all things, and this God who is sufficient for that which we most need. We gather here on Sunday mornings and we sing and we pray and we participate. The choir sings. They get together on Wednesday night and they sing. And I'm sure when they get home in their showers, they sing. I prefer to hear them on Wednesday night and Sunday morning. We do all that, not because we're trying to curry God's favor. We already have God's favor. That's called grace. We don't come here to worship to try to make God see how much improved we are from the previous Sunday. Because then there'd be some Sundays when we probably wouldn't show up at all out of embarrassment. And this is a hard text for a preacher, you understand, because we're expected to say some word so that when you leave here that you're going to be able to live better. You're going to have more direction. You're going to have something else to do. I've been conditioned to preach sermons that way. What are we to do? How are we to think? But Paul doesn't leave a lot of room for that in this opening. Paul's not interested in that kind of sermonizing because Paul is off saying, this is a God worthy of our praise. Pretty easy, isn't it? I mean, on days like we've been having recently, well, I know some of you would find something to complain about something anyway, but so you say, well, it's a little too warm, it's a little too humid, it's a little too dry, we could use the rain, whatever. But you know when you're walking on the beach or you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, now, come on. I'm not the only one that kind of imagines this. I feel my inside smiling. I have the back and forth with my daughters about, oh, the weather is yuck. And I'm out there like, oh, man, I just got out of the pool. It's feeling pretty good. Sun's out here. Breeze is in the palm trees. I feel like I'm caught up in an Eternal beer commercial. Because we, in those moments, feel the blessings of God. Now, by the way, some of you here know this, that I would be smiling in my stomach and insides if I were back somewhere where I could be on a sled heading down the hill too, because I love snow and snow cream and so forth. I could praise God and the mysteries of God in most places except August and Dallas. It is the wonder of what God has done, has given, the blessings that are ours. Come on, preacher, you're saying? Quit this stuff about praising and all that stuff, because, you know, I've got stuff to do, and I need for you to tell me something that I need to do. Give me a list. Give me a moral checklist of what I need to be about tomorrow. What am I supposed to do? What about the honoring neighbor? Can't you give me some wisdom about how to take care of the honoring neighbor without pushing him or her over the balcony? Tell me something that would help me in concrete ways. You see, there's a lot of atheism in the church today, and by that I mean this sense that it's about us. Everything is about us. It's all about what we are and what we should do. Too many sermons are about those kind of things, the to-do lists. Church is where I go how to learn to live. And it may be true to some extent that we come here and we leave and we have the wisdom that would enhance our abilities to make decisions in the coming week that would be more caring and compassionate. But you know, You can get wisdom in those self-help books. You don't need a preacher to give you the best diet, because obviously I haven't found that yet. You don't need God to come in here and give you the best recipes. Who needs God for the best recipes when you've got Google? You can find anything to do on Google. You don't need for the preacher to tell you to, well, I can't help but go here. I heard a sermon on TV, and this preacher, who has lots of followers, had gone out, and I wondered, did he really go out to buy cookies for himself? But he went out to buy cookies, and it was BOGO. He had two sets of cookies, and so he wove into the sermon this wisdom about how to climb up in the pantry and to climb up with the stepladder and to hide the cookies over behind the stuff. And I'm saying, say what? You don't need that kind of stuff from the preacher to figure out where to hide your cookies, because if you're like me, you will find them and eat them anyway. What I'm trying to say here is Paul's conversation to the people in Ephesus is grand. This is a cosmic thing. It's more important than much of the stuff we view to be important. There's no navel gazing here from Paul. Rather, this is an ultimate vision of the gifts that God gives, that each of us and all of us need to constantly be aware of. Chosen, forgiven, adopted, redeemed, sons and daughters of God. Any good that we accomplish in our lifetime is a human way of simply saying thanks. Don't settle for church on Sunday mornings to be a list of do's and don'ts. Bring yourself here with open hearts and spirits of the possibilities that there may be a mysterious wind blows just at the right time, and you experience and see something that perhaps you've never seen before. We're called upon to boldly consider this vision of God's realm, God's rule in the world. To be able to praise and to sing and to witness that realm. This is a place where the prisoners, the poor, the wretched of the earth are all seen by God as royalty. And the earth, well, the earth is a place that will be made new by the God behind it. We live in bondage, and we live with small visions and small plans. And God is trying to say, open your eyes and see what there is around you. Open your eyes and see the divine purposes unfolding before you. There was a discussion at the Hokey Pokey group Wednesday, lectionary group. And there was, this time of year, lots of churches are having, it doesn't matter what the denomination, a lot of them are having congregational meetings. Or only the Methodists, they have their charge conferences a little different time, but most of the churches are having congregational meetings of types. And so they're sitting around and talking and in some rather cynical ways, and I've been there, done that, know that. I know why. We get weary. But here's the thing that it struck me, having been in some committee meetings this past year, having sat through some board meetings this past year. In fact, looking back over my life, it seems like it's one stream of committees. But we ought not to go to committees or to choir practice, or to do anything else there is to do in the church and leave completely just worn out by it. Because here's the thing. It is that which we do, that which we sing, the praise we bring, all that we do, it is signs of the realm of God among us. And when we see those decisions in that kind of way, it doesn't suck the life out of us. It sets us on fire. I didn't say it wasn't boring until you get to the fire. But the grander thought of what God may be trying to do with this ever so fleshly group of people can be quite amazing. It's that vision of praise and thanksgiving and recognition that we're part of something grand, something wonderful. And even in those times when we are serving in a system, we get glimpses of the mystery of that God. When we get cut loose, that's what they used to say in the mountains about parties, even sometimes in churches. You get cut loose. People always, Sunday morning, they want to correct you don't know how many people worry about my stole. And I've said, look, you shouldn't have called a preacher who needs to bounce. I need to sing and bounce, and it gets warped out. And I do that because it is what you feel. You have to cut loose to feel the workings of God within you. And it drew me back to an old song. Well, old song in terms of my lifetime anyway. A country music song by someone who was around and then suddenly disappeared. She was from West Virginia, but I did love her so, Kathy Mattea. She sang a song, and I've stayed with me through the years, and it kind of speaks to me about what cutting loose means with some of this. She didn't write it, but it's a song that had this great chorus, and it went something like this. You got to sing like you don't need the money. You got to love like you'll never get hurt. And you got to dance like nobody's watching. That's why when we have these dances, I dance and dance, because that's how she freed me with that. Dance like nobody's really watching. It's got to come from the heart if it's going to work. That's what our praise is about. It is about singing like we don't need the money, loving like we'll never be hurt, dancing like nobody's watching, because the God behind all things is in the midst of all things and will never leave us and has done the work for us, that the relationship we have may be intimate and sustained for all of eternity. This is the good news. Worthy of our praise, even winter praise. Thanks be to God. Have any of you read the article about the average length of sermons? The average is 37 minutes. You owe me a lot.